And I just realized this was not being recorded. But I will send out the slides. So the 4 phases of project management, these are established by the Project Management Institute. And if you do any research or have any background in project management, then these are going to sound familiar. So your first phase is initiation. And initiation is essentially starting the project. This is where all of your activities are going to include what is needed to begin the planning the project. So it typically begins with the assignment of the project manager and ends when the project team has sufficient information to begin developing a detailed schedule and budget. So activities in this phase usually include project kickoff meetings, you're identifying the project team, developing the resources needed to develop the project plan, identifying and acquiring the project management infrastructure. So when we talk about project management infrastructure, this is not necessarily like developing an LMS or anything like that. This is purely talking about the infrastructure that you're going to use to manage the project. And I would say that building the shell in ISIS would fall under this category because we use ISIS essentially as a project managing tool. We utilize all the elements in there to go throughout the entire process. And then finally, define the project objectives. So your project objectives are different than, say, your learning objectives or your course objectives. Your project objectives are essentially, what is it that you want to accomplish with this project? And again, this can be whether it's developing a course, whether it's reviewing a course, whether it's just building, informal training. Any type of project is what this applies to. So you want to make sure that you understand what the ultimate goal of the project is within the initiation. Okay, and then on projects where major stakeholders are not aligned, the project will expend resources and time creating stakeholder alignment. So seeing where everybody fits in the process. All right, so after initiation is completed, you start the planning phase. And the PMI labels this as organizing and preparing. So this includes the development of a more detailed schedule. The emphasis of a planning phase is to develop an understanding of how the project will be executed and a plan for acquiring the resources needed to execute it. So when I say that, what does that come to, what comes to mind when I start thinking about that, or when I say that? Develop an understanding of how the project will be executed and a plan for acquiring resources needed to execute it. Funding. Okay. Anyone else? Resources. Thank you, Glenda, for spelling that out for them. Manpower. Good. All right, so we got some good things. We've got funding, manpower, time. Yes, we've got to do our times. How long is it going to take to not only complete the project, but also, incorporating time within the project itself. So planning is going to, planning activities occur during the entire life of the project. So this is not just going to happen in one phase. It's going to happen throughout. So in each phase, you're going to have to plan out what is going to occur. So it's definitely an iterative process. So planning, you're going to map out your project. Yes, so thank you, David. Get as much stakeholder input as possible. So having a champion, which your champion should be your project manager, the lead project manager for this. So they will generally be guiding and essentially being the broker between the team and the clients a lot of times. Especially if the client is not sitting in on a lot of the planning meetings, which often, a lot of times is not going to happen. So your project manager is the one who's going to be communicating throughout to get input. Also in the planning process, you're going to be developing detailed staffing, your procurement of resource, and you're going to do your project controls plan. All right, so phase 3 is execution. This is essentially where the work is carried out. You're going to see here when I talk about how we align the ISD process with the 4 phases, that this is where the ISD process occurs. It is not all spread out. ISD process occurs in execution. So this is where you'd have your major activities needed to accomplish the work. So for example, if you are, I know there's several of you who are in like cyber or information technology, this would include the development of your software code. On a training project, this is going to include the development and delivery of the training. So then once closeout occurs, that's our final phase. This is where the project is done. That's the end of the project. It is essentially closing of the project. And this is where your project staff are transferred. So maybe they go and they start on another project. Your project documents are archived, and the final few items are completed. Also, if maybe you have contractors working, for example, like you might have contractors working to develop content, this would be where the contractors would hand over all of the materials that they developed as part of the contract to the owners of the course. So this is where all of that transfer occurs at the closeout. Okay, so those are the 4 phases. So how is project management applied to instructional design? It might seem very straightforward, but if we're going by the project management principles as outlined by the Project Management Institute, it's not as clear-cut as we would assume it would be. So the traditional phases that, like I explained here, are mostly well aligned with IT development. So those of you in cyber who are maybe a little bit more familiar with that type of project management and probably could even teach me a few things. But how do you think how we apply these phases to the instructional design process is a little bit different, because each phase has their own definitive elements that we need to account for when we're going through and developing our courses, especially in the wonderful world of tech training, where we have a few different requirements that are very unique to our training environment. So I have a quote here by Williams Van Ruij. It says, project management is a critical contributor to the success of instructional design, and the generic ADDIE process for designing instruction does not fully encompass critical project management components. So what that means is that while ADDIE process is critical to the design of course, making sure that we have a validated course that is measuring what we're intending it to measure, it doesn't necessarily incorporate the key aspects of project management that are needed to ensure that a project is successful. So that's why it's important to try and combine these two different entities, is the best way I can say it. So the phases of project management typically occur sequentially. Let's see if I can, okay, no. And when looking at each of the 4 phases, execution is where your phases of the ISD process are going to occur. So we're going to go through each of the phases that I discussed briefly, and we're going to see how they're applied to the ISD process. So, sorry, this is initiating, it's not implementing. For some reason, I was thinking implementation in the ISD process when I was doing this. So this is it. I'll change this before I send them out. So initiating, typical activities that are included in this are identifying who will be affected by the project and ensuring that all stakeholders, including the client, are aware of the project scope and agree to its implementation. That's probably why I put implementing, but it's initiation or initiating. So you need to ensure that in this phase, everyone is on board with what the objectives of the project are. This will, I know usually at STRTs, that's where you kind of make the decisions that a new course is going to happen. And that's why it's important for the training manager to really be, diligent in following up with the career field manager to ensure that they understand what is feasible, and also and really inquire as to what their requirements are. And that someone mentioned that you should have someone who is communicating with the client. That's where your training manager comes in, because your training manager is the one who has the direct line of communication with your CFM. So someone asked a question, when we talk about the stakeholders, are we talking about the CFM as well as the people at the field for aircraft maintenance, for example? Yes, they're all stakeholders. So if you are, if you're talking about the aircraft maintenance field, yes, they're stakeholders, and they're someone that you want to take into account. But your CFM is the ultimate representative of your career field, and their job is to know what the career field needs and how maybe a new course or revising a course can benefit the career field as a whole. So that's why that's why I'm highlighting them as such a key component as a stakeholder. Yes, it will also include the MAGCOM functionals, because each MAGCOM is going to have their own unique needs as well. So you definitely, that's why an STRT is really important. And that's why I feel like, I think the training manager has a huge role in the project management process, if not serve as the project manager, because they generally are that broker between the career field, the career field manager, the functional managers, and also the project team. And so they need to be in constant communication with the leaders of the career field. But all of those conversations and understanding that does need to occur in the initiation phase. So because that establishes what the scope is. A lot of times when you start getting those MAGCOM functionals, that's where you get that scope creep. So you want to ensure that everybody is participating, or everybody understands what the parameters are, so that as they keep, if they want to add or get their own input in, they understand what it's going to do or extend on the time of the course. Someone says, the reason I ask, because in reality, when we get from the students that eventually become instructors, is to forget what they have learned at tech school. I think that's a career field thing, and that goes down to your trainers, because ultimately what happens, yeah, that is definitely a breakdown in the unit that they go to. As an education and training manager from my reserve side, I can tell you that if you look at your CFETP, your core tasks are what are taught in tech school. So really, when they do a JT, they should be building on the knowledge that they got when they were in technical training. And unfortunately, that is the old thought process, is that that you that what you teach in tech school is not the real Air Force. Someone asked, aren't LPMs a part of these discussions? The LPMs stand for Learning Program Managers. Everyone that is going to be involved in that course, so again, or whoever's involved in this project. Remember, we're looking at projects. I know we've kind of talked about scope creep. We've gone into the career field wide. That's when your STRT and UTNW occurs, is all of those individuals that are involved will attend those meetings. When we're looking at projects in particular, we need to narrow our scope to that particular project. So those people who are going to be involved, the stakeholders who are part of the project, are the ones who would be in the conversations. When the chat that we have going on here, that sounds like it's more career field wise. So just keep that in mind. Okay, let's move on to planning. So once we have established the parameters of the project and what is going to be included, we start going into the planning process. So the planning process group is going to establish the total scope of the effort. They're going to define the objectives and develop a course of action. The most important part of the work for the project manager is that the most important part for the project manager is planning, because inadequate planning is very often the cause of a project's failure. It also includes defining your team members' roles. So in your initiating phase, you are establishing who your stakeholders are. Now in planning, you're actually determining what their roles are. What tasks are they going to be assigned? You're finalizing the project scope, and you're also developing a communication plan. So how are all of the team members going to be communicating? If you work in the same office, this is going to not be an issue, because you are going to be basically walking next door to talk to one another. But if you are displaced or geographically separated, it's good to come up with a communication plan, maybe how often you're going to meet, dates for those projected meetings, things like that. You also want to create a communication plan that considers all of the key stakeholders for the project. Don't just include your SMEs and your instructional designers. Make sure that everybody who is a stakeholder is invited to those meetings so that they can weigh in on the project's progress and planning. Okay. So the executing phase is your ISD process. So in this graphic, you'll see you have your 4 phases of project management, and then you have your ADDIE process. And as you can see with the arrow, all of the ADDIE, if I would shrink it down, it would go in that executing box, because that is where the work occurs. So And we're talking all phases of ADDIE. So all of your analysis, your design, your development, implementation, evaluation, constant review of the course, all of that is going to occur in your executing phase. So just keep that in mind. All of your initiating and your planning, that's going to happen before you even get into the design and development and delivery of your course. So where you're talking about planning, that's where, we're talking about the career field level stuff where we have our STRT and all of that. So all of your design, development, and delivery, all of that happens in your executing phase. Although the monitoring and control, so when I checked on the Institute, monitoring and control, there used to be 5 phases, and when I just checked yesterday, they narrowed it down to 4. So I think there's some schools of thought that monitoring and control are a 5th phase, and then there's some where it's the 4 phases, and that includes executing. So it depends on which method you're going. So monitoring and control can be considered part of that executing phase. But for simplicity, I'm just keeping with the 4. Okay. Yes, Glenda, because analysis is part of your task analysis and your learning analysis, whereas your planning is more so like planning your project scope. And that's why I say for those of us that are familiar with the ADDIE process, you have to kind of separate your ADDIE thought process from your project management thought process, because they're 2 different entities. So what you know from ADDIE is all going to occur in that executing phase. All right, so closing phase is the closing of the project. And is when the project officially ends. This is also your opportunity where you can have kind of your hot washes and identify your opportunities for future projects, your lessons learned, what worked well, what didn't, what can we take on to our next project. And that's where you're going to want to document it all. Okay, so we've got some good insight in the chat on talking about monitoring and control. And I will say that there are some resources that talk about monitoring and control. Again, I kept it simple just to those 4 phases, especially for those who are novices in the project management process. If you read into it, it can get really complicated, which is probably why the PMP certification test is crazy hard. So this is a simplified project management lesson. Okay, so what are some cool project management tools that I'm going to show you guys that you can use? I have discovered several that I really, really, really like. So I have a list here, and this screenshot, for those of you who are familiar with ISIS or use ISIS and didn't realize, the management plan is essentially your project plan. And this is where you are going to be able to input your dates and plan out your schedule. The nice thing with ISIS is that once you input your dates, all you're going to do is you're going to click edit, and then you'll enter the date started and the date estimated completion, and the date actual completion. And then what will happen is once you input those dates, you can click generate Gantt, and it'll actually create a Gantt chart for you. The other tool that I really, really like, if you are a checklist person, or if maybe you want to assign tasks to people, and maybe they're not in ISIS, or you guys are not even using ISIS. Like I've seen a couple people who don't use ISIS, they use other programs. I really like Trello. Has anyone ever heard of Trello? No? Okay. So I have a yes, no. Okay, well, I'm going to show you guys what Trello is. And here's the thing, it works on the AFNet. All right, so I'm going to share my application screen really quick. Yes way, it works on the AFNet. Okay, can y'all hear me? I'm back. Sorry, my computer kicked me out. No, I'm at home. I don't know what happened. I think it was because I had too many tabs open. Okay, so let's try this again. No, I'm on AT&T, which I can't say is much better. Okay, so this is Trello. I really like this. raise your hand if you are a checklist person, or throw a thumbs up or a celebration or something like that. I see a couple hands go up. Okay, if you like checklists, you will like Trello. It is like a virtual, um, sticky board, basically. So what I like about Trello is that you create these little cards, and um, you can assign, so you can make these lists using these cards, and then within them you can add what's happening with that task. You can assign people to the task. So like if you have members, you can add a member. So you can say, okay, this person is doing this task. You can color code it. You can also move it. So like say if you want to show progress, maybe if you want to do like it by the ISD process, you can move it to a different area. So if you have to do, then it could be pending, then it can be done. And so you can just move it all over the place. You can personalize it. There's a lot of people who use it for lesson planning. But this is a great way for collaborating with your team, especially, and it is, yes, it is free and it works on the AFNet. So this is really cool because I've seen it also where people have used it, student collaboration and group work. If you are on a project, the project manager can put all the different tasks that are going on, and maybe in certain phases or certain dates, they can move the cards over so everyone can see as progress goes on. So that's why I say if you're a checklist person, you could just put 3 rows and have to do, in progress, and then done. And so you can move all your cards over, and then show like a clean slate in your lists. But this is a really cool way because you can add members to it, and everyone can show what their progress is and work together on that. So that's a really cool tool that I like. And I actually was looking at using it for an assignment in one of the courses that are actually in AOL. So that was one of my thoughts. So some other tools that you can utilize, let me go back to my files. Yes, I believe you can. You'd have to dive further into it to see all of the functionalities, but I believe you can hide or block certain things. I do know people like they use Trello just for like their own personal, like someone says an electronic day runner. Yes, it's a great planner too. Like if you're just looking for something to keep yourself on track, like a to-do list, it's really good for that too. That's actually something I'm going to probably start doing for myself to keep track of everything that I have going. Yes, it does. So if you look at, here, let me pull it up again. I knew you guys would get a kick out of Trello. I love Trello. All right, so if you, oops, didn't mean to do that. Sure, let me share my application again. Okay, there we go. So if you look on the far right-hand column, do you see where it has the dates and it has like the little time? That will show you like where the, what the date is, and if you're on target or whatnot. So, and if it goes past like the date, it'll go turn red. So it keeps you on track, and that's why I like it. Okay, someone said there's tools for e-learning. Yes, so I I think the Air Force does have some of those on e-learning, Air Force e-learning, or I know we can't all access YouTube on the AFNet, but if you're on the LWS, there's a lot of videos on YouTube about it. All right, Google Suite. So I love Google Suite. That's where I do all of my documents. I know for the online learning team, when we were all teleworking, that was our main source of collaboration and working on a course planning document together. And Google Suite is free. I do know that on the AFNet, the drive itself is not accessible. However, you can access each of the individual suite elements. So you can access Google Sheets, Google Docs, Google Slides. Google Forms is accessible for the initial creation, but then you can't access it because it's connected to the Google Drive. Google Sites is another one that you can utilize. But something as simple as Google Sheets or Google Docs is really nice because you can collaborate real time and everyone can log in and actually update information at the same time. Another element is Microsoft Teams, and as you know, with the pandemic, I know they brought the CVR Teams on board, and I love Teams because one thing that you can do with Teams is you can collaborate on a document real time, just like you would in the Google Suite. You can also link different elements. So like Microsoft Planner is kind of like Trello, where you have the different cards and you can assign people to the tasks. Well, you can add Planner into as like a plugin for Microsoft Teams. So if you have a bunch of people on a project, you can add them to a team and then assign them to tasks and then track them using Microsoft Planner. Microsoft SharePoint, it's like old school, but it still works. You can, that's a really good way where you can share documents and you can post schedules as well. And then good old Microsoft Excel Gantt charts. So I have a template for a Gantt chart that I actually used for my practicum project that I just finished for school. And I'm developing a pretty complex project for special missions up at A3Q. Let me see where my Gantt chart is. So I'm going to send y'all this template. So it is just an Excel template. I know on the Air Force version, it doesn't, I don't think it's available, but I have it on my home version and I downloaded just a blank template and I'm going to email it out with everything else. And so this is, I really like this because you can add in, it has macros already built in. So you have your project start date, and then it'll automatically generate the calendar based on the project start date. Then it's color coded. So say if you want to organize your project by weeks, or if you want to organize it by phases, you can add in all of your different tasks that you have going on. You can list who they're assigned to. You can also put what progress it is, and then you'll see it'll put the like it'll be gray if it's completed, and then the blue is for what is left. And then if once you update it, it'll change for you. Someone said Microsoft Project. I'm not familiar with Project, so I've seen that typed in here a couple times. I'll have to look into that, but I believe that's specifically a project management software. I just like this one because it's simple. and you can update your dates, and it'll basically do everything for you. So I've downloaded the blank template of this, and I'm going to send that out to everybody. Okay, let me get my slides. Okay. So that is basically it for project management. I think this has probably been one of the most robust discussions that we've had, because I know we have several people that experienced in project management, and there has been a lot of, the Air Force actually offers a lot of great resources for project management. I know you have your green belt and yellow belt and black belt, as far as, um, those kinds of programs. But just basic project management, having a good understanding of that really does help in terms of your instructional design projects. And I think we've all done it to some degree without realizing that that's really what we were doing. So I really encourage you, if you are just trying to organize your project, even just using some of these tools is going to help in terms of communication as well, because a lot of times the communication element is the biggest issue that we deal with in terms of project management. So as always, I've got to market ourselves. If you want more, in the analysis of learning, we do talk about project management planning to a small degree, mainly in terms of the FEA, or the feasibility, when we're looking at the course review process. So I'm glad someone actually brought that up, that project management does occur with course review, because that is completely true. This is everything that we've talked about is not necessarily just for brand new courses. It does also occur in the course review process as well. If you're looking for more course development, a great project management tool that we actually utilize in IDLE is our course alignment tool. And while it doesn't really give us timelines, it really helps you outline what your parameters are and what your requirements are, so that you can relay those to your stakeholder or your client. So understanding who your client is such an important aspect. So that's a great course for that. And then, of course, if you aren't familiar with the ISD process, you should take Application of Instructional Systems Development, because that will explain it to you. So that is it for this session. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to us. This is our information, and you make sure you visit our newly commissioned website, which is awesome. And if you'd like to email us for more information, please feel free to reach out, and we will be happy to help you out. Thank you all for attending. I'm really glad that you all joined us today, and I will see you all next time. Bye.